God of War Ragnarok was one of the most anticipated games in recent years. With the massive success of God of War 2018 and how the game ended setting up for Ragnarok, fans could not have been more excited for this game. It was announced in 2020, and ever since then, the anticipation for it was insane. And when this game was released, it did not disappoint in the slightest. This game was a massive success in every possible metric. It has sold over 15 million copies up to this point and got amazing reviews from every imaginable source. The anticipation for this game was most definitely met with one of the best sequels in gaming in recent memory. I absolutely loved this game, from the story, the combat, the characters, the world. I feel like they improved in so many ways. I loved how they upped the scale with the story here and how they handled certain character arcs in this game. I had high expectations for this game and they were completely met. From the start of the game to the very end, I enjoyed all of it. This was one of my favorite gaming experiences in recent memory. Obviously, no game comes without its flaws, and this game is by no means perfect. But God of War Ragnarok was an amazing experience, and I loved it. With that being said, let's get into my review of God of War Ragnarok. Starting things off, this game was one of the most beautiful games that I've ever played. It wasn't some groundbreaking graphics, but there were countless times throughout this game where I was just amazed by how good the game looked. I think what really makes the setting and graphics stand out in this game is the world design. Each realm has such a unique style and really stands out from one another. We explore all 9 realms in this game and all of them are beautiful. We have Alfheim, Asgard, Jotunheim, Vanaheim, Midgard, Svartalheim, Nilfheim, Helheim, and Muspelheim. We also have the realm between realms and Ironwood as other locations we go to. Each realm is so different from the other. There's different enemies, climates, ways of traversing. All the realms offer such a different experience from the other and I love it. Seeing how all the realms were affected by Fimbulwinter was really cool to see. I also loved how we were finally able to explore every single realm in this game. In the 2018 version, we only had access to 6 realms, but with Ragnarok, we get to explore every single one. Vanaheim, Svartalheim, and Asgard were all added in this game, and funny enough, Vanaheim and Svartalheim are probably my 2 favorite realms in this game. So, the addition of these other realms added so much to the game, and I liked how they focused on these new realms a lot more instead of just reusing the other realms to the same extent as the last game. Back to the part on how they designed the realms, it was so well done. They did a great job of leaving many parts not accessible until later on in the game, so it gives a reason for the player to return to explore more. Overall, I do prefer the setting and realms in God of War Ragnarok compared to 2018. Not saying I don't like 2018's, I love it and I like some parts of its world more than Ragnarok's. Like Midgard was a lot better in 2018 than in Ragnarok. But overall, I like how Ragnarok handles all of its realms more. The setting in this game was unbelievable and I loved every part of it. There were definitely some changes with the setting in this game and the same can be said about the gameplay. I love the gameplay from 2018 so much, but Ragnarok expands on it even more and improves on it in a lot of ways. And I feel like the biggest way they improved was simply adding more variety in almost every aspect. We get a new weapon, there's different kinds of shields that block in different ways, different uses to the Spartan Rage, more enemy and boss variety, using your weapons to traverse around, multiple companions, and lastly, dual protagonists. Starting off with the new weapon, the Draupnir Spear was an amazing addition to the game. They went a very similar route with this weapon as they did with the Blades of Chaos as they introduced it later in the game, and I prefer that method. It adds a new layer to gameplay at a point where the gameplay could have been potentially getting repetitive. At first, I honestly struggled figuring out how the spear worked, but once I got the hang of it, I loved it. Being able to throw the spear an infinite amount of times and being able to do a massive amount of damage by throwing multiple spears into someone, then stopping to destroy all of them was so much fun to do. I also just loved using it for melee attacks too. With it having a wider range than the axe, but not quite the range of the Blades of Chaos, it offers a good middle ground. And the animations for the finishers were so cool and I never got tired of seeing them. Moving on to the shields, they give us 5 different kinds and they all offer a different way of going about the combat. We have the Shatter Star Shield, Onslaught Shield, Guardian Shield, Stonewall Shield, and the Dauntless Shield. Each of them offer a different way of fighting as some focus more on defense and absorbing attacks, and others are more focused on parrying and countering attacks. I enjoy it a lot as it adds more depth to the combat and different ways of playing. Another thing that they added was multiple ways of using the Spartan Rage. This was a fantastic addition. We get 3 forms of Spartan Rage in the base game and 1 additional one in the Valhalla DLC. In the base game we have Fury, which is the normal one we had in 2018, Valor, which helps regain your health, Wrath, which does one heavy attack, and lastly in the Valhalla DLC we have Legacy, which produces the Blades of Olympus. I personally ended up using Wrath the most. I don't know why, but I ended up enjoying it a lot and found it the most effective. But I still use Fury from time to time, and Valor I rarely ever use, I just really didn't like it that much. Another place where they improved this game a lot is with the enemy and boss variety. One of my biggest issues from God of War 2018 was the lack of variety with enemies and bosses and how reused and repetitive they got in that game. But Ragnarok completely fixed that issue here by adding great variety and also making sure they didn't just spam the same mini bosses over and over again. Like, the amount of trolls and ancients I faced in God of War 2018 should be illegal. They just added so many more mini bosses in Ragnarok, and the variety compared to 2018 is an actual joke. It is so much better in every way. Another thing that I think they improved on in this game were the main bosses. There were more boss fights and were just overall more enjoyable. The Thor boss fights were amazing, the Nidhogg fight was fun, and so was Garm. The Heimdall boss fight might be my favorite in the entire game. It was so good, I loved it. Just like hitting Heimdall for the first time was such an amazing feeling. And the Odin boss fight was also really good with a good amount of variety. I still fairly enjoy the boss fights in 2018, but I think they are better in Ragnarok. The improved variety with this part of the game was probably the biggest improvement in the entire game. Another thing they added was multiple companions. We get a total of 8 different companions throughout this game compared to only Atreus in 2018. We have Ingrid, who is the magical sword. We have Thor for a little bit, even though he's mostly useless. Then we have his daughter Thrud, who is very useful, unlike her father. Sindri and Brok are also companions in this game. So is Ingrid Boda, and she has really cool abilities. And the last 2 companions we had were Freya and Atreus, who were the main 2 throughout this game. I love the variety of companions and how many we got. It was a very nice improvement from God of War 2018. The last thing in terms of gameplay that they added was dual protagonists. In God of War 2018, we could only play as Kratos, but with this game we are now able to play as Atreus. This is a very welcome addition for me. I liked having the 2 playable characters and experiencing their 2 different perspectives throughout the game. I enjoyed Atreus' sections for the most part. Some of them were boring, but overall they were good. I also like how we get a completely different combat style with playing as Atreus. It was definitely not as enjoyable as playing as Kratos, but it offered a new gameplay experience which was still fun. Overall, the gameplay was something that was definitely expanded on and something that I believe was improved. I overall enjoyed the combat more, I like the added variety with mechanics within combat, and I love the new companions and being able to play as Kratos and Atreus. Moving away from the gameplay into the next part of this video, we're going to be talking about the side content. I wasn't the biggest fan of the side content with God of War 2018, but I think that Ragnarok does it better than 2018 in almost every way. The side content in this game is genuinely so much fun. I think one way that was improved was by adding more favors. There are so many more and it adds a lot more content to the game. Some of the best parts of the side content is the dialogue between all the characters during it. Especially some parts with Kratos and Atreus, so many moments in which Kratos is teaching Atreus something and it's just amazing. Also, some dialogue sequences between Freya and Kratos are so good in this game. There were definitely some super memorable favors in God of War Ragnarok that I really liked. My favorites were Elven Sanctum, Song of the Sands, and Freya's Missing Piece. These missions were really fun and I enjoyed them all. There are so many more that I do love, but I can't sit here putting all of them. Song of the Sands was such a memorable one for me. It's so cool to see how you can achieve such different dialogue sequences depending on when you do this mission. For me, I did the first of these missions without Atreus, and constantly Mimir and Freya were saying how Atreus would have loved this. Then I saw a video of someone doing it with Atreus, and it is a completely different experience, which is awesome. It shows the time and care taken with this game and the hours put into having completely unique experiences with certain missions depending on who you go with. I also loved Freya's Missing Piece, and really just getting more of a backstory of Freya and everything that happened with her and Odin was great to see. The missions revolving around the Lost Spirits were also pretty good in this game. There were still too many in my opinion though. But within these missions, Kratos usually teaches Atreus something that I really like, and a few times the missions revolved around Freya and again gave more of a backstory to her life, which was really cool to see. The best realm for side content in this game was hands down Vanaheim. Like, oh my gosh, I spent hours upon hours in this realm doing so much side content, it was amazing. I loved doing all the stuff in that realm so much, the missions were so unique and a lot of fun. But I felt like they took some things out of this game that were in God of War 2018. With God of War 2018, we had the Muspelheim and Niflheim trials. I loved both of those so much and they were some of my favorite parts from that game. We still had a new version of the Muspelheim Trials in Ragnarok, but they didn't have anything like the Niflheim ones, and I would have liked to see that. Also with Ragnarok, they have the Berserkers as the equivalent to the Valkyries from 2018. I think the Valkyries were better, but it's not like that big of a difference at all. The Berserkers are still really fun to fight and pose a really challenging combat experience. Overall, the side content was massively improved in my opinion. It's better in basically every way, and it's so much fun. Now we can finally move on to the last part of this video, which is the story and narrative. I absolutely love it in this game. In my opinion, I enjoy the story more than God of War 2018's. And that's not me saying it's a better story, it's just different and I like it more. With 2018, we had a much more grounded story with the goal being to bring Faye's ashes to the top of the Jotunheim Mountains, which is a fantastic story, and the game heavily focuses on Kratos and Atreus' dynamic for most of that game, which again, I absolutely love and they nailed it. But with Ragnarok, the story is on a much larger scale, obviously with it being about Ragnarok, and I enjoy that type of story more for this series. The stakes are at an all-time high throughout this entire game, and you feel it. Having to constantly deal with prophecy and hoping that you can defy it really raises the stakes. The whole prophecy dynamic throughout this game I really enjoyed, and I think they handled it great. Getting into the story now, the opening hour or two of this game is one of my favorites in any video game. Like I said a few seconds ago, the stakes and scale of this game are a lot higher, and you realize that almost instantaneously in the opening hour or two. You go through like 3 or 4 boss fights in this opening, and it's absolutely insane. You start the game having to get away from Freya in this beautiful chase sequence, then you have to fight Atreus as a bear later, and following that you have such an amazing introduction to Thor and Odin. The introduction to these characters is one of my favorites ever as well. Like, I don't even know how to describe it, but the whole sequence of seeing Thor for the first time and talking to him, and then Odin coming in, it was just so well done. I felt so immersed in that moment, and I forgot I was playing a video game. The voice acting is just unbelievable. Every conversation feels so real, and every character is voice acted beautifully. Thor and Odin are two of my favorite characters in this game, especially Odin, but we'll talk more about characters later. Then, after talking to them, we have one of my favorite fights in this game, which is the one against Thor. This was a fight that us as fans were waiting years for, and it did not disappoint in the slightest. Everything about it, from the set piece, to the dialogue, to the combat, this fight was amazing. And obviously that one part where you die and then Thor revives you was actually one of the coolest things in this game. The whole opening was genuinely perfect. It had everything from great combat, amazing dialogue sequences, to beautiful set pieces. This game's opening is one of my favorites ever. Moving away from the opening, a major focus in the story and plot is prophecy. Constantly throughout this game, we were reminded of the prophecy that Kratos dies. The way they use the trope of defying your prophecy is done well, and I know it's a basic trope, but the way they handled it was really good in my opinion. We get to see how Kratos and Atreus deal with this. It's really interesting watching how both these characters deal with it, and it creates a very interesting dynamic between the two characters. The way they have to learn to trust one another was really cool to see. We see Atreus take on more of a responsibility in this game, and Kratos has to learn to trust him in these situations. But Atreus still has to rely on Kratos for things as he messes up a lot. Santa Monica just does a brilliant job of showing their relationship and the ups and downs of it. They both have to learn how to trust one another as each of them grow. Atreus needs to trust Kratos in the fact that he still needs him, and Kratos has to trust Atreus more as Atreus is getting older and can make these decisions. It genuinely feels like such a real relationship between the two of them, and is by far the best part of these two newer games. It's a beautiful representation of a father-son dynamic. Kratos in this game, in my opinion, is the best version of Kratos that we have ever seen. I feel like with this game, I finally started to understand Kratos more as a character and resonate with him. Lots of his development in this game goes hand in hand with his relationship with Atreus. Starting off, Kratos does not want Atreus to fall down the same path as he once did. He wants to shield and protect Atreus from the horrors of war and destruction, and constantly urges Atreus to not go down that path. Especially with Atreus being so adamant on Ragnarok and taking down Odin, this is something that Kratos has to deal with throughout this game. We also see even more in this game Kratos dealing with his past and trying to move on from it and become a better person. He wants to break the cycle of war and destruction that he grew up on. He did not want the same life for Atreus that he had. It was one of my favorite parts of this game, watching this conflict between the two characters as Kratos sees Atreus potentially going down a path that he knows is not good for him. The last part with Kratos' character that I absolutely adore is the shift from a god of war and destruction to a god of hope. All of Kratos' life, all he knew was war and pain and destruction. That's all he ever thought he was. This is something that is expanded on even more in the DLC when he talks to his younger self. Kratos never believed he could be a symbol of hope and be a god that was worshipped. We hear Odin bring this up once by saying Kratos has no idea what it's like to be worshipped. But that moment when Kratos sees the prophecy of people worshipping him was one of my favorites in the entire game. He suddenly realizes a new possibility that he never once thought was possible. He never believed he could be that symbol of hope for others. The only way that people ever saw him was a monster and a destroyer. He never believed people could look at him and see a hope for a future. All his life he destroyed and took away the future of things. But now he is one of the people you can look towards for a future. He generally has one of the best character arcs I've ever seen from a character. The way they conclude his story here in this game is perfect in my eyes. Moving on to Atreus, he definitely has his character development, but not as extreme or in depth as Kratos. There are a good amount of missions in this game where we play as Atreus and really get to see his point of view on things where we didn't get that as much in God of War 2018. It was really cool seeing how adamant he was on taking down Odin and watching the whole thing develop. It's funny as a lot of these characters are gods but they have such human characteristics. Atreus grows up very much like a normal kid would in how they act. He takes on a lot more responsibility in this game as he is older now, but he thinks he can do a lot more than he can. He still messes up in a lot of places throughout this game and still needs Kratos to guide him in many ways. Atreus is very focused throughout this game on defeating Odin. We see that heavily with how the missions in this main story are structured. We see it with him wanting to free Tyr as he believes he plays a major role in stopping Ragnarok and Odin. We also see it with him seeking out Freya for help, going to Alfheim to discover Groa's prophecy, and Groa's prophecy being a major plot point in this game as at this point in time we believe we know something that Odin doesn't. Atreus very heavily believes that they can win Ragnarok now with this knowledge that Odin doesn't have. But following that mission, we are hit with by far my least favorite mission in this game, being the one in Ironwood. Bro, this mission was unbearably slow. Like, it was cool for the first 10 to 20 minutes, but goes on for ages for absolutely no reason. Like, the little boss fight against the giant was cool, but like, we were there for ages just for Atreus to learn about the prophecy that Kratos dies during Ragnarok. I did not want to go around on that animal picking fruits or whatever we were stuck there doing. It was so boring. And I'm not one to hate slower sections, and I'm usually an advocate for slowing the game down in areas, but this was way too long. Moving on from that though, I also really love the parts where he is in Asgard. It's so cool watching him interact with all these characters here and we get to see the inside of what's going on in Asgard. I also love the plotline revolving around the mask and having to retrieve all the pieces. It gave us a background on what Odin was trying to do. And we also get introduced to just some amazing characters when Atreus is in Asgard, with Heimdall, Thrud. We just meet a bunch of cool people there. Another thing I really liked was going on missions with Thor and Thrud as it mixed up the gameplay and allowed us to get to know other characters. This is what I was mentioning when I meant Atreus takes on more of a responsibility in this game, which was cool to see. I really just love the way they handle the story in this game and how it develops throughout. I think the pacing is decent, but there are definitely parts where I think it's either too slow or fast. Like with Ironwood, I think it's too slow, and for me the ending is a little bit rushed, but I'll expand on that later. Santa Monica just know how to tell stories, and this one is unbelievable. Again, I think they just captured the scale and importance of everything so well throughout this game. Watching Kratos and Atreus go at this together and learning to trust one another more throughout this game is beautiful to see. The way that both of them handle the knowledge of the prophecy that Kratos dies throughout the game and how their view changes on it is so good. This is such an amazing culmination of a story. They built everything up so well and nailed the execution of it perfectly in my opinion. They build up the idea of Ragnarok in the first game and it doesn't fall short at all. The story just handles all of its plot points so well. Moving on to the side characters in this game, I think this is an area that the game absolutely nailed. We have a bunch in this game, but in my opinion, they all get their fair share of development and all feel fleshed out. We have Freya, Brock, Sindri, and Tyr as the main side characters in this game. And all of them add so much to this game and it's amazing. Starting off with Freya, I love the dynamic that she and Kratos had in this game. So many times they just go back and forth with their dialogue and I really enjoyed listening to them talk about their lives. Really getting more of a backstory on Freya and her relationship with Odin was so cool to learn about. I enjoyed all the missions that you could go on with her, especially the one in Valheim where we have to break the curse that Odin put on Freya where she can't leave Midgard. She was also a really good companion to have and was probably my favorite in the entire game. Moving on from Freya, we have Brock and Sindri. Both these characters get a lot more fleshed out in this game. The biggest plot point surrounding both these characters in this game is the plot around the fact that Brock died and Sindri brought him back to life. To me, that was such a cool layer to add to both these characters and really showing the bond between these brothers. I also like the fact that Brock didn't know that Sindri brought him back to life. Another major plot point surrounding both these characters, but especially Sindri, was Brock's actual death. That moment was absolutely insane to me. I did not see that twist coming at all. Like when we learned that Tyr was Odin, my mind was blown, and then he just takes out Brock. That entire sequence was insane. But seeing how Sindri changed after that moment for the remainder of the game was really cool to see. He's the last character that you would think would go down that path, but he did, and I really like seeing that change in character from him. I also just want to mention that the part right after this where Kratos and Atreus go hunting is perfect to me. They slowed the game down at the perfect time and it fits so well. We just experienced one of the craziest moments in the game, and they slowed the game down drastically by making us hunt and really taking in what just happened. But overall, the side characters in this game were handled so well to me. They were all characters from the previous game but were expanded on more in this one, and it was done so well. Moving away from the side characters and into the villains of this game, I think Thor and Odin are fantastic. Especially Odin. Like, I don't know how they did it with Odin, but every time that guy talked, I genuinely questioned if he was that bad of a guy. He genuinely seemed pretty chill in a lot of parts of this game, and it's so funny because obviously he is the villain, but the way he spoke, it never came off as that. And that's exactly how Odin acts, and they nailed it with him. He's so cunning and sneaky. I haven't seen too many depictions of Odin, but this one I really think is one of the best ones ever. I also really liked how they handled Thor in this game. Throughout the entire game, he was portrayed as a villain, but you always felt like he was just being controlled by Odin and that there was a redemption there to be had. And there was a redemption, but it maybe lasted like 15 seconds as Odin just takes him out the second Thor disobeys. It was really sad to see Thor die. I wanted him to live and have that redemption and finally get a good relationship with his family. But nope, Odin just has to end his life right then and there the second he disobeys. All this stuff occurs at the end of the story, and the ending is one of my issues with this game. I think the ending and the stuff that occurs is fantastic. I just think it was a little bit rushed. I would have liked that final battle to be extended longer and just have more things happen. Because a chunk of it is just going through fighting enemies we have already fought in this game, which isn't terrible, but I wish they added more along with that to the ending. You know the ending of this game is too short when the ending is shorter than the section in Ironwood. The final mission is around like an hour long, and the mission in Ironwood could be over 2 hours. Like, that's just insane. Like, how can a section that is as boring as Lost Sanctuary be longer than the final mission of the game? I just feel like not enough happened in the finale of this game, and there wasn't enough content in it. I've seen some people say that the series should have been a trilogy, and I see where they're coming from in some places, but I feel like they would have had to come up with a lot more content, and the third game would have felt dragged out to me. I really think the ending just needed like an extra 2 hours to flesh out the experience more. But there are still some great parts with the ending, like the final fight against Thor and Odin are really good. I think both these fights lived up to the final conclusion. Odin's fight was very good, but I also think that could have still been on a larger scale though. Overall, I love the ending of this game. Watching Atreus destroy the mask was awesome to see, and watching him make that decision. Also, him capturing Odin's soul in one of the giant marbles was really cool, and then Sindri just destroys it, which came out of nowhere, but I loved it. The ending was very good to me, but the build up to it was just slightly rushed. I don't think the fact that it was rushed ruined the ending at all, but I think it could have been even better if it was longer. After the Odin fight, the game finishes off with Atreus walking around seeing everyone and eventually meeting up with Ingrboda. She tells him to go with her to find the remaining giants, and after that, we get this final moment between Kratos and Atreus, and it's just beautiful. It brings together the arc that these two characters have gone on perfectly. Atreus tells Kratos he has to go on this journey with Ingrboda alone, and Kratos says he is ready, and they have this emotional final moment. The dynamic these two characters have is one of my favorites ever, and this culmination is perfect. And the game ends with them going their separate ways. For the future of this franchise, I'm honestly not too sure where it's going to go. I think the most likely course of action is us getting some spin-off game with Atreus, which would be really cool to see. Now for the future of Kratos, I really think his story is over. I think this game ties it all together perfectly, and they just add the cherry on top with the Valhalla DLC. He could appear in the Atreus game in some way, but I don't think he would play a prevalent part. But I would love to see a game with Atreus doing stuff with the giants. It would be awesome. Comment below what you guys would love to see from the God of War franchise in the future. God of War Ragnarok was one of the most anticipated games in recent years, and in my opinion, it lived up to all the expectations. This game is unbelievable in so many ways. I think it tells an unbelievable story and genuinely has some of the most real characters in any game. These characters feel real and you can relate to them and make connections that not many other games are able to do. And they just improved the game in so many ways with the combat, the world, the side content. This game has improved in a lot of ways. This game continues to age better and better for me, and that is so important with the game to me. My praise surrounding this game just gets higher as time goes on. This is the perfect conclusion to Kratos' story to me, and it was beautiful watching it unfold. I absolutely love this game, and it's up there with some of my favorite games ever. My final rating of God of War Ragnarok is a 9.5 out of 10. This game is everything that I wanted and more. If you guys made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate it and I hope you enjoyed it. If you would, it would mean a lot if you guys could comment, like, subscribe, do whatever. Again, thank you guys for watching and I will see you in the next video.